Hello and welcome to another of these short interviews with staff and students from York St John reflecting on the death of George Floyd. I'm delighted to be joined today by Alexandra Dales. Alexandra is the School Research and Knowledge Transfer Lead for York Business School, which is quite the mouthful, and I'm very impressed if you know what that is. So great to have you here today. Thank you for coming. And my question to you, Alexandra, is how did the death of George Floyd affect you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and having me today. It's quite a serious question, so I'm going to give it a serious, a sort of honest and heartfelt answer. So obviously, when I found out about George Floyd through the media when it first happened, and I saw the reporting and the news, and then the video clips. I mean, it felt enormously distressing, and I couldn't understand why this happened. What's happening where you have this basically an attack on a black man happening from the police, and I very much, as I found out more about it, I very much felt, what would I have done if I was in that position? I tried to actually think myself, what was I standing in front? What would I have done? And the distress that I would have felt. I also thought, as time went on, about what if it had been me, in a different world, a different situation, or somehow those circumstances had arrived, and the level of distress. And he was talking about his children and begging, and that's terrible, absolutely terrible. And I just I sort of, as I went through thinking more and finding out about some of the consequences of the Black Lives Matter movement, there's much more discussion about structural racism, institutional racism, why it happens. That very much got me thinking about I need to know more about this. I need to find out more, and to understand, and to actually have an effect, hopefully. So I actually came across Reni Eddo-Lodge's book, where I no longer talk to white people about race, and I loved it. It was brilliant. It taught me about. I began to, I'd say, properly understand, or begin to properly understand structural racism. It's where I came across an understanding of white privilege, and it really made me reflect on the benefits that I've had as a white woman in the UK, and the unconscious benefits just by being, and how that privilege is automatically puts me ahead of my BAME friends and colleagues, and really that was I'd say the beginning of a journey for me to be much more conscious, much more aware of what structural racism is, its experience, all the minute ways that it occurs, the unfairness of it. But the second really big part of what I got from her book, Reni Eddo-Lodge's book, was it's not just about feeling guilty about being a white person in this situation, in this world where there is endemic structural racism. Just do something about it. Take action. It's not enough just to be I'm not racist. You actually find a way to be anti-racist, and find a way that you can contribute positively to making a change. And I've read more, and I'm still on that journey, and I'm still trying to find out and work productively. So that's why I'm here today, because I think it's important that that I can hopefully be an example to my white colleagues of how to be constructive, or just start finding out what is white privilege, what is structural racism, what does it mean, and how am I part of that, consciously or unconsciously. And I think that's really important. And I think it's tragic that it took the awful murder and the dreadful behaviour and cruel behaviour of police members of the police force in Minneapolis to trigger and be such a response. But it wasn't the first, and it's not going to be the last. His loss to his family, to George Floyd's loss. So I probably say let this chance when we're discussing. So I'm part of the Race Equality Charter self-assessment team, and that was one of the actions I wanted to take to be part of the conversation, to contribute. So if you're white person watching this, think about it, try and start your own journey if you haven't already, and just try and understand what it is to be anti-racist, and positively contribute to society. So that's probably where I'd got to so far, hopefully.
Thank you. That's a really honest response, and I think the call to action is crucial, isn't it? Do you feel that things changed for you in the way that you thought about this when Derek Chauvin was convicted of George?
I waited up and waited for the judgment, and I was so relieved when he was found guilty on all accounts, because I would have felt so hurt and distressed for everybody involved, for society, if the judicial system hadn't seen what was blindingly obvious. And I could see the response. I was relieved, but also actually felt very quickly an overwhelming sense of sadness. Just this gentleman who had just been murdered and lost his family, his children, and for everybody in this family involved, and that was my sort of response and relief, and so it's carrying on. That was my. I'm hoping it should set a precedent in the US, but also in the UK, with increased consciousness that we actually have to stop and question and make things plain and bring fresh air and get society thinking.
That's right, because things like Stop and Search, for example, have some real issues around the Black community particularly, which need to be addressed here as well. So we can't pretend it's just over there, can we?
No, not at all. It's endemic, and certainly in the last year or so, in adverts, walking on the street, in newspapers, I see structural racism and institutional racism. I actually, the white privilege, I can spot it and see it now, and it's everywhere. And if you don't know what it is, you don't see it. And it's just finding out what actually it means and what is white privilege, and questioning and raising a flag. And a key part of what I'm trying to do is making sure my own children wake up, grow up rather, grow up with this understanding, and have come up being aware of how they benefit and what they can do, hopefully, positively to be anti-racist.
I think a response that white people quite often have when they start to think about things like white privilege and being anti-racist and so on is to feel quite defensive, quite, well, I'm not racist, are you accusing me of racism, and that can make us sort of close down and not want to engage. And I wondered whether you encountered that in yourself, or if you have any kind of advice to people about how to overcome that defensiveness.
The way I understood it is that it's not being called, oh, you're racist. It's more, do you see how you benefit through existing structural racism that's endemic, that's historical, that's an institutional structure? It's a social structure that is present all around us. And you won't see it if you don't see those aspects, those features of racism. And I think that's distinguishing structural issues from the personal issue, and reflecting personally in your relationship with structural racism is a really constructive thing and helpful thing to do, and that's how I would take that, and how I would advise. It's if you don't see yourself as a racist, brilliant, but are you anti-racist in your understanding of where structural racism is and how you fit within that, in this big scheme of this world, this complicated world that we're in?
Yeah. Have you found that this has changed your approach academically? Because you are a lecturer, you're part of the university. Has it affected that?
Yes, in the sense that I am conscious. I mean, that's why I joined the Race Equality Charter, a self-assessment team, to understand better how racism exists within the university structure. I'm definitely still learning, but in my relationships with colleagues and with staff, I'm much more confident in talking about, is this a situation where there's, in our learning, in what we're teaching, in the content of what's delivered, where we are thoughtlessly including, because we're not aware of it, because the lack of awareness, where there are aspects which are microaggressions, or is that an appropriate text? Have we got in our reading lists a range of authors that represent diverse viewpoint, or are they all one particular category? So I think it's thinking about, it's changed how I talk and how I interact, and the internal sort of reflection I have in my professional relationships, and not being afraid of raising the issue and say, we need to talk about this. This is because that's the only way things are going to change.
That's right, yeah. And we've got a subgroup, haven't we, on decolonising the curriculum, who are making strides in this.
Yeah.
Alexandria, we're about to run out of time, but I feel that you have really helped to sort of take the very human, personal tragedy of a man's life ended, and helped us to see George Floyd also as symbolic of something bigger than he was, but that he was very much kind of caught up in, institutional racism that affects and depletes us all. And that we as white people really need to take responsibility for our part in it and start to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.